What would you do if your own daughter-in-law slapped you across the face, just because you asked for $150 to buy your medicine? My name is Eleanora Fitzgerald, though most call me Nora. I am 73 years old. I never thought I would live to see the day where, after giving everything to my family, I would stand in my son's kitchen, hands trembling, voice shaking, asking for such a small amount of money, only to be struck like a stranger. That slap wasn't just on my cheek. It was on my soul. It was every ounce of dignity I had left being treated like it didn't matter. And for a moment, I believed her that I was small, forgotten, and powerless. But here's what Cassandra, my daughter-in-law, never realized. Sometimes, when people try to break you, they awaken something far stronger inside of you. That day, she thought she was putting me in my place. Instead, she set me on a path that led to billions. $3.5 billion to be exact, enough to freeze a bank and turn her pale with fear. But before I tell you how I went from begging for medicine to holding a fortune that shook her world, I want to pause and speak to you, my listener. If you are watching this from your living room, your kitchen, or maybe even lying in bed at night, I pray for you. May your health be steady and your breath light. May your hands stay strong enough to cook, to write, to hug those you love. May your mind stay clear so you never forget the faces of your children and grandchildren. And if you are already in your 60s, 70s, or 80s, I want you to know something from the bottom of my heart. You still matter. You are not invisible. You are not useless. You are needed. And I pray that nobody in your home ever makes you feel less than the treasure you are. Growing older should be a reward, not a punishment. After losing my Alistair, the man who stood by me for nearly 50 years, I thought my reward would be peace. I thought I would spend my final years sitting in our garden, baking bread for neighbors, or reading by the fire. But grief is heavy, and silence is even heavier. The big, empty house in Bellingham felt like a tomb. So when my son Michael told me, "Mom, come live with us, it will be better for you," I believed him. I thought I was walking into comfort. Instead, I walked into a cage. My world shrank to one bedroom, where I became Michael's mom instead of Nora. My days turned into quiet mornings where I ate oatmeal alone so I wouldn't dirty Cassandra's spotless kitchen. My voice, once strong enough to run a business and host dinners for dozens, became something to be ignored. I was spoken over, dismissed, left out of family conversations as if I were a ghost standing in the corner. You see, when people stop looking at you, when your words no longer carry weight, it hurts more than any ache in your knees or stiffness in your hands. That is the pain many grandmothers know, the slow erosion of respect. And Cassandra, she didn't just ignore me. She seemed to enjoy reminding me that I was dependent, that I was in her house, living by her rules. But silence does not mean defeat. While she thought I was shrinking, something inside me was gathering strength, waiting for the right moment. And that moment came with one request. One simple request for $150 that turned into a slap that would change everything. Before I take you further into my story, I want to ask you for something. Please subscribe to this channel right now so you never miss stories like mine. Leave a like to support this work and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to see the cities, the countries, the homes my words are reaching. Because unlike Cassandra, I will never make you feel invisible here. When my Alistair was alive, my life was full of meaning. He was more than my husband. He was my partner, my confidant, my safe place. Together, we built an antique shop in Bellingham. We filled it with furniture, clocks, and ornaments collected during our travels. People came in not just to buy, but to listen. Alistair had a gift for storytelling. He could look at a chair and describe the hands that carved it, the rooms it once belonged to, the families that gathered around it. With him, every day felt rich. Not because of wealth, but because of connection. When death took him, it felt like the air was sucked out of my lungs. The same home where we had danced in the kitchen and shared quiet cups of tea turned into a shell. The walls were heavy with memories, but the laughter was gone. I would sit in the garden, staring at the roses we had planted together, and feel like I was watching life happen from the outside. Meals turned tasteless. Days bled into nights. The silence was unbearable. Michael, my only son, noticed. "Mom," he said softly, "you can't stay here alone. Come live with us. It will be better for you." His tone was kind, and in my grief I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that moving into his home meant companionship, warmth, and a chance to be surrounded by family again. So I made the painful decision to sell the house Alistair and I had built our lives in. I packed away photographs, china sets, and little tokens of our travels. Each box felt like I was tucking away pieces of myself. Still, I told myself this was how families stayed close, that Michael's house would be my new home. But the day I arrived, the truth revealed itself. I wasn't walking into a sanctuary. I was stepping into a place where I would slowly disappear. Cassandra, my daughter-in-law, greeted me at the door. Her lips curved in a smile, but her eyes were cold. "We've prepared a room for you," she said, her voice clipped. She led me down a narrow hallway to a small bedroom at the far end of the house. Four walls, a single bed, a small dresser, and a window that looked out onto a gray fence. That room became my world. At first, I told myself it was only temporary, that I'd still be part of their daily lives. But Cassandra's rules began to shape my existence. I was no longer Nora, the woman who had run a shop, traveled the world, and hosted gatherings. I became Michael's mom, tucked away and expected to stay silent. Mornings were the hardest. I'd wake early, my body aching with age, and head to the kitchen. But I soon realized I wasn't welcome there. Cassandra prided herself on her spotless counters. If I so much as left a plate in the sink, she'd sigh loudly, making me feel like a careless child. To avoid her glare, I began making myself a single bowl of oatmeal, quickly washing the pan and retreating to my room before she woke. My mornings of baking bread, filling the house with warm scents, and sharing it with neighbors became a memory. When the family gathered in the living room, I often sat quietly in a corner chair. Cassandra would plan vacations, talk about the children's school activities, and scroll through her phone without once turning toward me. Sometimes I'd try to join the conversation, offering a memory or a thought, but she would nod absently and change the subject as though I had never spoken. The sting of being ignored cut deeper than words. I had once been a woman with purpose, with friends, with stories. Now I was treated like furniture, present, but unseen. And the cruelest part was that my son seemed blind to it. Michael, gentle by nature, avoided conflict. If Cassandra dismissed me, he would simply glance away, too timid to speak on my behalf. His silence hurt nearly as much as her indifference. Every part of my independence was slowly stripped away. I no longer drove because Cassandra said the car was too old and unsafe. My garden tools were sold off in a yard sale without asking me. Even small joys, like baking cookies for my grandchildren, were taken when she insisted they had too much sugar. My life was reduced to books, a window view of rain-soaked streets, and the sound of my own breathing. There's a pain many elders carry that goes unspoken. It's not always hunger or poverty or illness, it's invisibility. To feel like your words no longer matter, your presence no longer counts. That was my prison. And I know many of you watching have felt something similar. Have you ever lived somewhere you felt invisible? Where your needs were brushed aside and your value ignored? That was my reality in Michael and Cassandra's home. I had once been a woman of substance, and now I was reduced to a shadow. I told myself to endure it, to be quiet, to avoid stirring trouble. But deep inside, a fire waited. Cassandra thought she had stripped me of everything. But what she didn't realize was that storms often gather strength in silence. And soon, her cruelty would push me to the edge. Growing old changes you in ways no one prepares you for. My mind was still sharp, but my body no longer obeyed me. My hands, once quick enough to restore antique furniture or stitch tablecloths, had stiffened into painful knots. Arthritis, such a small word for something that steals so much. Every morning I woke with my fingers swollen, as if I had slept holding rocks. Simple things became battles. Turning a doorknob, tying an apron, lifting a kettle. The worst was at night. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, my hands burning as though invisible flames were licking at my joints. I wanted to cry out, but who would listen? In that house, silence had become my only companion. When I finally went to see the doctor, he examined me with care. "Mrs. Fitzgerald," he said softly, "your condition has advanced." I'm prescribing you something stronger. It will help with the pain, but he hesitated before finishing. It isn't cheap. About $150 each month. 150. A number that once would have seemed so small. Back when Alistair and I were running the shop, we could spend that much on a single delivery of antique china. Back when birthdays, holidays, and small luxuries were things we didn't think twice about. But now, living in Michael's house under Cassandra's rules, $150 felt like a mountain. I had my own money. Savings Alistair had set up long ago. But I hadn't touched those accounts in years. In my mind, they were sacred. An emergency fund meant to remain untouched unless absolutely necessary. For decades, I had taken pride in standing on my own 2 feet. Asking for help felt like admitting that my independence was finally gone. I tried to convince myself I could endure the pain a little longer, but each day grew harder. My hands shook while holding a teacup. I dropped spoons. I struggled to brush my hair. Finally, the reminder from the pharmacy arrived on my phone. Prescription ready for pickup. The words glowed on the screen like a cruel taunt. I sat on the edge of my bed, heart pounding. Should I ask? Could I? Memories rushed back, of times I had helped others without hesitation. I had given Michael money for college, helped neighbors during hard winters, paid for church repairs when no one else could. I had been the helper, the provider. And now, at 73, I was about to beg for $150 in my own son's house. I whispered to myself, it's only temporary. Just this once. But shame still clung to me like a second skin as I stood, smoothed my sweater, and made my way down the hall toward the kitchen where Cassandra waited. The kitchen smelled of coffee and toast that morning, but there was no warmth in the air. Cassandra sat at the island with her tablet propped up against a mug. Her nails clicked across the screen as though the world beyond that glass mattered more than the person standing in front of her. I cleared my throat. Cassie, I'm sorry to interrupt. Without lifting her eyes, she muttered, What is it, Nora? I'm busy. My chest tightened. I clutched the back of a chair for balance. It's about my medicine, the new one the doctor prescribed. It costs $150 this month. I was hoping maybe you could cover it for me, just until I can sort things out. I'll pay you back. The words tasted bitter. I had never begged anyone for money in my life, not even when Alistair and I were scraping by in the early years of our shop. Her head snapped up. $150? For pills? I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. Her lips curled into a smile so sharp it felt like a blade. She tapped her tablet, eyes scanning something on the screen. Suddenly, her smile vanished. She slammed the device down on the counter with a crack that made me flinch. You've been lying, she hissed. All this time pretending you're broke. Pretending you can't even buy your own medicine. Her voice rose, each word dripping with venom. I've seen your account. Nearly empty. So where's all that money from the house you sold? What did you do with it, huh? Hiding it? Spending it behind our backs? My heart skipped. No, Cassie, that's not true. That account, Alistair set up more than one. I haven't touched. Don't you dare lie to me, she snapped, slamming her palm against the counter again. You sit here under my roof, eating our food, using our electricity, acting helpless. And now you expect me to hand you money like a spoiled child. Her words hit harder than I expected. I felt myself shrinking inside, every insult pressing down on me like stones. I had once been a woman people came to for help, and now I was being accused of scheming, of leeching, of being less than nothing. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to cut. You're nothing but deadweight, Nora. Admit it. The silence that followed was heavier than her words. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Her words hung in the air, cruel and heavy. I stood frozen, staring at the counter, my lips trembling but unable to form a reply. Then, without warning, her hand shot up. The slap landed with a crack so sharp it seemed to echo through the whole house. My head whipped to the side, my cheek burning instantly as if fire had been pressed against my skin. For a moment, the room spun. I gripped the back of the chair to keep myself from falling. The taste of salt filled my mouth, tears mixed with humiliation. I had been struck before in life by hardships, by loss, by grief, but never by a person who should have treated me like family. Never by someone who owed me respect. I pressed my lips together, holding back a sob. One tear slid down my cheek, cutting through the heat where her hand had landed. Cassandra stood above me, chest rising and falling, her face twisted in triumph, as if she had just put me in my place once and for all. But she had no idea what she had just done. Something stirred inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. The sadness, the quiet obedience, the countless moments of being ignored, they hardened into resolve. I remembered Alistair's voice, steady and calm. "Nora, never let anyone decide your worth. You are stronger than they know." I straightened slowly, the sting on my cheek still sharp but my back a little taller than it had been moments before. Cassandra thought she had silenced me, but all she had done was awaken the woman I used to be, the woman who had survived loss, built a business, raised a child, and carried herself with dignity through storms far worse than this. I turned and walked away without a word. Her mocking laugh followed me down the hallway, but it no longer pierced me. My heart was pounding, but not with fear, with something far stronger. For the first time in years, I whispered to myself, no more. No more shrinking into the background. No more begging. No more letting someone treat me like I was invisible. That slap wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of a reckoning. And to you, listening to my story right now, let me ask you, have you ever been underestimated? Has someone humiliated you, treated you like you were worth less than you truly are? If you have, leave your story in the comments. Because here, your voice will not be ignored. Your pain matters. And just like me, you may find that what was meant to break you becomes the very thing that lifts you up again. I shut my bedroom door behind me, my cheeks still throbbing from the slap. The sound of Cassandra's scoff drifted faintly from the kitchen, but I no longer heard it as a wound. I heard it as a challenge. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my trembling hands. For years, I had let myself believe I was powerless, that silence was safer than confrontation. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I stood, went to the back of my closet, and pushed aside sweaters that smelled faintly of cedar. My knees creaked as I crouched down, reaching for a small leather box I hadn't touched in years. It was Alistair's. The lock clicked open easily, as though it had been waiting for me. Inside lay his old keys, some coins from our travels, and at the very bottom, a thick, leather-bound notebook. Not a journal. A ledger. Alistair had carried this everywhere during the years we ran our antique shop. I remembered him scribbling in it after customers left, numbers and notes in his neat handwriting. I always assumed it was shop business. But just before he died, he made me promise to keep it safe. "One day, Nora," he whispered, gripping my hand. "If you ever feel your independence slipping away, open the ledger. It holds your way out." My fingers shook as I traced the worn cover. I hadn't understood his words then. But now, after the slap, I realized this was the moment he had prepared me for. I slipped the ledger into my purse, grabbed my old car keys, and left my room. Cassandra didn't even notice me walking out the front door. My old Volvo sat in the driveway, its paint dulled by years of moss and rain. She had called it an eyesore more than once, insisting it be sold. But Alistair had insisted it be maintained, even in his final months. A quiet gift of foresight. Sliding into the seat, I turned the key. The engine coughed, then growled to life. My hands tightened on the wheel. I hadn't driven in years, but the muscle memory returned with each breath. Slowly, I backed out of the driveway, gravel crunching under the tires. I didn't head for the pharmacy. I didn't head for the bank. I knew where I needed to go first. Lydia's house. Lydia had been my closest friend since our days running the shop. Where Alistair saw numbers, she saw people. She knew me better than anyone. My joys, my sorrows, my pride. If anyone could help me understand what Alistair had left behind, it was her. The drive felt like a small rebellion. Each mile away from Cassandra's house loosened the invisible chains around my chest. My cheeks still stung, but beneath the pain was something stronger, freedom. When I pulled into Lydia's driveway, the little bungalow looked warm and alive. Flowers lined the porch, and the curtains were open, letting in the gray daylight. I sat in the car for a moment, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Then the front door opened, and there she was, my Lydia, her eyes widening in surprise. "Nora," she called. "What are you doing here? You look shaken." I stepped out, clutching my purse. My voice cracked as I pointed to my cheek. "Cassandra," I whispered. Her expression shifted from shock to fury. She rushed forward, her arms wrapping around me. "Come inside," she said firmly. "Tell me everything." And for the first time in years, I felt safe enough to begin. Lydia ushered me into her living room, the familiar scent of chamomile and old books wrapping around me like a blanket. She sat me down on her couch, pressed a warm mug of tea into my hands, and waited. At first, the words wouldn't come. My throat tightened, my chest heavy. But when she touched my hand gently, the dam broke. I told her everything. The slow suffocation in Michael's house, Cassandra's constant control, the rules that made me feel like a stranger in my own family. And finally, I told her about the $150 request. When I described the slap, Lydia's eyes burned with anger. "That woman," she muttered, her jaw tight. "How dare she treat you like that?" She reached over and gripped my hands tightly, her warmth easing the tremble in my fingers. "Nora, listen to me. You are not weak. You are not worthless. You are one of the strongest women I know. Don't let her convince you otherwise." Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't just from pain. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Truly seen. When I calmed enough to breathe steadily again, I pulled Alistair's ledger from my purse. The worn leather cover seemed to glow faintly in the lamplight. "Lydia," I whispered, "Alistair made me promise to keep this safe. He said it would be my way out if I ever needed one. I think this is that moment." She leaned closer, curiosity softening her features. "Let's look." Together, we opened the cover. Inside were pages filled with Alistair's precise handwriting, dates, numbers, company names. At first glance, it looked like shop accounts. But as Lydia scanned the lines, her brow furrowed. "This isn't inventory," she said slowly. "These are investments." I blinked. "Investments?" She nodded, flipping through page after page. "Stocks. Bonds. Company shares." "Nora, he wasn't just running the shop. He was quietly building something. Look here, this one's from 30 years ago. And here, this is recent, only a year before he passed." My heart pounded as I leaned over to see. Each entry carried details I had never noticed before. Alistair, my quiet, practical husband, had been tracking not just antiques, but companies, ones that seemed small at the time but had grown larger in recent years. At the very back of the ledger was a single page, different from the rest. A neat list of numbers, followed by a bank name I didn't recognize, Veritas Global Capital. Beneath it, a code written carefully in Alistair's steady hand. "What is this?" I whispered. Lydia touched the page as though it were holy. "It looks like an account number. And this must be a security code. Nora, I think this is what he meant when he told you to keep the ledger safe. He wasn't just protecting memories. He was protecting your future." I pressed my fingers to my lips, trembling. All this time, I thought the money was just in that one account Michael knew about. Cassandra looked at that empty shell and assumed I was broke. But this could be different. Lydia leaned back, her expression serious but full of hope. "There's only one way to know. We need to call the bank." The words made my stomach flip. My entire body buzzed with fear and anticipation. For so long, I had accepted being small. But holding that ledger, sitting beside my oldest friend, I felt something stirring, something powerful. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, independence, the chance to stand on my own again. I nodded slowly. "Then we call." Lydia fetched her phone, her fingers steady where mine trembled. She dialed the number written in the ledger and handed the phone to me. For a long moment, I stared at it, my pulse racing. Then I pressed it to my ear. "Veritas Global Capital," a calm male voice answered. I swallowed. "Yes, my name is Eleanor Fitzgerald. I have an account number I was told to call about." My voice shook as I read the long string of numbers and the code Alistair had written beneath it. There was a pause on the line, long enough for me to wonder if I had made a mistake. Then the man inhaled sharply. "Mrs. Fitzgerald," he said, his tone suddenly respectful. "We've been waiting for you." My grip tightened on the phone. "Waiting for me?" "Yes. This account is unusual. Highly confidential. May I ask what prompted you to reach out now?" I glanced at Lydia, who gave me a small, encouraging nod. "Because," I whispered, "it's time." Another pause. Then the man spoke again, his voice lower, almost reverent. "Mrs. Fitzgerald, your late husband was one of our most trusted private clients. He had a remarkable gift for identifying opportunities, investments that others overlooked. We managed the accounts, but the strategy, the vision, that was his. I can confirm that what he left behind for you is intact. In fact, it has grown significantly." My throat tightened. "How much?" "You would need to come in person for the full briefing," he replied gently. "But I will say this, your husband ensured that you are among the wealthiest women in this country. His final investment has multiplied in ways even we could not have predicted." My heart thudded so hard I thought it might give out. I could barely form words. "Wealthiest? That can't be right." "It is, Mrs. Fitzgerald. We can arrange for you to visit our main branch in San Francisco. Bring identification and the ledger. We will explain everything." I ended the call with trembling fingers. The phone slid onto the table as I stared into space. Lydia reached for me. "Nora? What did he say?" I turned to her slowly, my lips parting, my voice fragile as glass. "Billions. He said Alistair left billions." Lydia gasped, covering her mouth. For a moment, we just sat there in stunned silence, the weight of it pressing down like a wave. Billions. Not thousands. Not millions. Billions. I had spent years feeling like a burden, begging for scraps of dignity in a house where I was treated as an inconvenience. And all the while, I was sitting on a fortune so vast it could change everything. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but this time they weren't from humiliation. They were from awe, from gratitude, from the crushing realization that my Alistair had never stopped protecting me. Even in death, he had left me a shield so strong no one could strip me of my worth again. I clutched the ledger to my chest. "He saved me," I whispered. "He knew I'd need this. He knew someone would try to take everything from me, and he made sure they couldn't." Lydia squeezed my hands. "You're not broken, Nora. You never were. Cassandra tried to make you feel powerless, but she has no idea who she's dealing with. You have everything you need to rise again." For the first time in years, I felt it. Not just relief. Not just hope. Strength. I wasn't the quiet, invisible woman in the corner anymore. I was Eleanora Fitzgerald, wife of a man who saw beyond his time, mother of a son who needed to remember my worth, and a woman who would no longer bow to humiliation. I lifted my chin, wiped my tears, and whispered, "This is my way out. My dignity is mine again." The next morning, Lydia and I boarded the earliest flight to San Francisco. Neither of us slept the night before. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying Cassandra's slap, replaying the words from the banker, "among the wealthiest women in this country." It didn't feel real. Could a woman who had just begged for $150 yesterday really be the same woman who held billions today? As the plane lifted off, I pressed my forehead to the cold window. The world below looked small, like tiny toy houses and roads laid out in patterns. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small with it. Lydia sat beside me, her hand covering mine. "You ready for this?" she asked. I managed a faint smile. Ready or not, it's happening. The flight was quiet, each of us lost in thought. I remembered Alistair's steady presence during our trips years ago. He always carried a book, always calm, always a step ahead. Now, even in death, it seemed he was still guiding me, still leading me to safety. When we landed, a driver sent by the bank was waiting at the curb with a discreet black car. "Mrs. Fitzgerald?" he asked politely, opening the door for us. I nodded, my pulse quickening. San Francisco's streets blurred past the window. The city buzzed with life, people rushing in and out of offices, unaware that an old widow from Washington was on her way to change everything. At last, the car pulled up to a tall, modern building with no grand sign. Just a small brass plaque that read, Veritas Global Capital. I gripped Lydia's arm as we entered through the glass doors. The lobby was sleek, quiet, filled with polished stone and soft lighting. It didn't look like a bank. It looked like a fortress of secrets. A receptionist greeted us and immediately guided us to a private elevator. "Mr. Evans is expecting you," she said with a respectful nod. My stomach churned as the elevator doors closed. I clutched the ledger to my chest, the weight of it both terrifying and comforting. Lydia squeezed my shoulder. "Nora, breathe. You're not here to ask permission. You're here to claim what's already yours." When the doors slid open, a tall man in a tailored suit was waiting. His silver hair gleamed under the lights, and his eyes studied me with careful respect. He stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mrs. Fitzgerald," he said warmly. "I'm Mr. Evans. We've been expecting you." Mr. Evans guided us into a private conference room with tall windows overlooking the city skyline. The table gleamed, polished to perfection, and on it sat a folder embossed with the Veritas seal. He gestured for us to sit, then folded his hands. "Mrs. Fitzgerald, first allow me to say, your late husband was a remarkable man. Many clients leave investments, but very few leave legacies. What he built for you is extraordinary." My throat tightened. Alistair never spoke of it. "I only found his ledger after." I paused, touching my cheek absent-mindedly, remembering Cassandra's slap. "After things became unbearable." Evans nodded solemnly. "That's exactly why he set this up. He wanted to protect you, not just financially, but with discretion. He instructed us never to contact you directly. He said when the time was right, you'd come on your own." He opened the folder. Inside were charts, numbers, and documents neatly arranged. My eyes blurred at the sight of them, but Evans spoke with clarity. 35 years ago, Mr. Fitzgerald began purchasing shares in emerging companies. Many of them failed, but a few changed the world. He had an unusual ability to see potential where others saw risk. Evans flipped to a page showing a company logo I didn't recognize. This one, an artificial intelligence startup he bought into when it was worth pennies. They went public last year. The valuation skyrocketed. Your husband's small stake multiplied beyond imagination. My pulse raced. "How much?" Evans smiled gently. "That single investment is now worth just under $3 billion. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Lydia's eyes widened beside me. Evans continued, his tone steady. "And that is only one branch of the tree. There are others, biotech firms, green energy companies, even a medical robotics manufacturer. Mr. Fitzgerald's trust diversified across industries. Conservative in some places, bold in others. Altogether, Mrs. Fitzgerald, your current net worth exceeds $4 billion. The words felt unreal. $4 billion. I had spent years in a house where I couldn't buy my own medicine, where I was told I was a burden. All the while, Alistair's foresight had quietly grown into a shield strong enough to protect me for the rest of my life. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I held them back. I wanted to appear strong, steady, worthy of the man who had believed in me enough to build this future. Evans leaned forward, his expression warm but serious. "This isn't just wealth, Mrs. Fitzgerald. It's independence. Your husband wanted you to have choices, where you live, who you surround yourself with, how you spend your final years. No one can take this from you, unless you allow them to." His words landed heavier than Cassandra's slap. For the first time in years, I felt whole again. I had not been abandoned. I had been entrusted. I straightened in my chair, my hand resting firmly on the ledger. "Then it's time I use what he left me." I sat straighter in the chair, the weight of the ledger heavy in my lap. Mr. Evans' words still rang in my ears. Independence, choices, dignity. Cassandra's voice, her slap, her sneer, all of it faded into the background. I wasn't a beggar in her kitchen anymore. I was Alistair's widow, the custodian of his vision, and the owner of billions. I met Mr. Evans' eyes. "Then let me be clear. I want to make a withdrawal. Not a small one. I want $3.5 billion moved into my name. Immediately." The room went still. Lydia gasped, her hand flying to mine, as if to ask if I was certain. Mr. Evans blinked, then leaned back in his chair, studying me with renewed respect. That, he said slowly, is not a request we hear often. Or ever. I've spent years being treated as if I had nothing, I replied, my voice calm, almost icy. Now I want to prove to myself and to others that I have everything I need. My dignity, my freedom, my independence. $3.5 billion. Today. Evan's jaw tightened, but not with disapproval. With caution. He pressed a button on the table, and within seconds, 2 associates entered the room carrying sleek laptops and secure briefcases. Begin transfer protocol, he instructed. One associate nodded, typing quickly. The other placed a black folder in front of me. Mrs. Fitzgerald, before we proceed, you'll need to verify your identity through multiple forms of authentication. Your husband left strict instructions. I signed documents, entered codes from the ledger, pressed my thumb onto a scanner. Each step felt like peeling away another layer of the prison Cassandra had built around me. But then, just as the final code was entered, the associate froze. His laptop emitted a sharp chime. He looked up at Evans, alarm flashing across his face. Sir, he said quietly, the system has locked. The withdrawal request has triggered a level 5 freeze. The room tensed. Evans' expression shifted to stone. Level 5. Yes. Immediate suspension of all movement until full board approval. It's protocol for transfers above $3 billion. My heart thudded, but I forced my face to remain composed. Lydia clutched my arm. Evans leaned forward, lowering his voice. Mrs. Fitzgerald, this is not a denial. But such a request automatically activates every safeguard we have. The board must convene. Security protocols must be satisfied. Until then, the account is frozen. Frozen. The word hit like a gavel. For a moment, silence hung thick in the air. Then I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. So be it. Let them freeze. I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer. But make no mistake, this money is mine. And when the board sees me, they will know I am ready to claim it. Mr. Evans studied me for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Very well, Mrs. Fitzgerald. I'll arrange the board meeting. They will not be expecting you, but I suspect they will never forget you. I placed my hand over the ledger, my fingers firm against the leather. For the first time since Alistair's death, I felt him beside me. Not as a memory, but as strength. The woman Cassandra slapped in the kitchen no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who was about to move billions, frozen or not. Back in Washington, Cassandra thought she still held all the cards. She had spent years treating me like an afterthought, an old woman dependent on her mercy. But the moment Veritas froze the account, her world began to collapse. That evening, Michael came home to find his wife pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal, tablet clutched in her hand. What's wrong? He asked, loosening his tie. Cassandra's face was pale, her hands shaking. She shoved the tablet at him. The account. The one linked to your mother. It's locked down. And look, she tapped furiously on the screen. The papers are sniffing around. They're saying a trust tied to your father could be worth billions. Michael blinked. Billions? That doesn't make sense. Well, someone thinks it does. Cassandra snapped. She downed the rest of her drink, her voice sharp with panic. And if it's true, your mother isn't the frail old woman we thought she was. She's sitting on more power than we could ever imagine. Michael didn't respond. He stared at the tablet, the truth slowly sinking in. He had grown up believing his father was just a shop owner, a man of modest means. But a part of him, the part that still respected his father, knew there had always been more to Alistair than met the eye. The next 24 hours were chaos. Relatives called, pretending concern but fishing for gossip. Neighbors asked questions they had no business asking. Cassandra's colleagues texted her nonstop, forwarding speculative articles from local business journals. Every ding of her phone made her flinch. Her temper grew short. She snapped at Michael. Do something. Call the bank, call your mother, I don't care. If she controls billions, where does that leave us? Everything's in her name, Michael. We've been living like fools. But Michael said nothing. He sat at the table with his head in his hands. Cassandra didn't realize it yet, but something in him was shifting too. He had seen his wife belittle me for years. And now, faced with the truth of my strength, the scales inside him began to tip. When I finally returned home, suitcase in hand, the house fell silent. Cassandra stood at the sink, pale and trembling. Michael looked up, his face a mixture of confusion and shame. I walked past them slowly, the rhythm of my footsteps steady and deliberate. For years, my presence had been ignored. Now, every step made them flinch. "Mother," Michael said softly, "is it true?" I set my purse on the counter and turned to face them. My cheek, though healed, still carried the memory of Cassandra's hand. But my eyes no longer carried sorrow. They carried certainty. "Yes," I said evenly. "It's true. Your father left me more than enough to live with dignity. More than enough to remind anyone who's forgotten who I am." Cassandra's lips parted, her voice thin. "Nora, I didn't know." I cut her off. "You knew enough to slap me when I asked for medicine. You knew enough to accuse me of being a burden. What you didn't know," I leaned closer, my voice like steel, "was that your cruelty would awaken the very power you feared most." She recoiled, her face draining of color. For the first time, she looked small, like the frightened woman she truly was beneath all her arrogance. Michael stood, guilt plain in his eyes. "Mother, I'm sorry." His words cracked, weighed down by years of silence in the face of his wife's cruelty. "I should have defended you. I should have seen." I looked at him steadily. "You still can. But know this, Michael. My days of silence are over. From this moment on, I will live as I please. No one will dictate where I sit, what I eat, or how I spend my money. Not you, and certainly not your wife." The tension was thick, but for once, it was not mine to bear. Cassandra wrung her hands, her voice trembling. "Please, Nora, I didn't mean to." I held up my hand. "Don't beg now. Respect isn't something you give when convenient. It's something you show consistently. And you failed." Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of me physically, but fear of what I represented. Independence, authority, and a truth she could no longer bury. The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. Then I spoke again, my tone softer but resolute. "I don't need revenge, Cassandra. I don't need to slap you back. My life itself is the answer to your cruelty. You tried to make me small, and instead, I became larger than you could ever imagine." I picked up my suitcase, turned toward the hallway, and added one final truth. "This house is no longer my prison. It's your mirror. Every time you walk into this kitchen, you'll remember the day your arrogance crumbled." Cassandra sank into a chair, her face pale, her body trembling. Michael stood frozen, caught between the woman he married and the mother he had rediscovered. I walked to my room with my head high. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying shame. I was carrying freedom. And to you, listening to my story now, I want to ask, has karma ever come back around in your life? Have you ever watched someone who mistreated you face the consequences of their actions? Share it in the comments, because stories like these remind us, what goes around always finds its way back. The next morning, I rose earlier than usual. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel dread about walking into that kitchen. Instead, I carried a quiet smile and a small envelope in my hand. Cassandra was already there, sitting stiffly at the table with her coffee, eyes puffy from a night of restless sleep. Michael sat beside her, avoiding my gaze. I placed the envelope gently on the table in front of her. "For you," I said. Suspicion flickered in her eyes. She opened it slowly and pulled out a check. Her lips parted as she read the amount. $150. Her head jerked up, confusion etched across her face. "That," I said calmly, "is to cover the medicine I asked for. The same amount you claimed was too much for me. Consider it my repayment for the slap you thought I deserved." Her hands shook as she held the paper. Her cheeks flushed with shame, but I didn't let her speak. "Money was never the point, Cassandra. Respect was. And that day, you showed me you had none." I reached into my purse again and pulled out a folder. This one bore the seal of the county registrar. I laid it next to her coffee. You might want to read this too. Michael leaned forward, curiosity pulling him in. His eyes scanned the page, and they widened. This is the deed to the house. I nodded. Your father anticipated many things before he passed. One of them was that I might not always be welcome under my own roof. He transferred ownership of this property into my name years ago. Cassandra, the home you've ruled over so ruthlessly, it was never yours. It is mine. Cassandra's face drained of color. She stammered, You can't. I can, I said firmly. And I will. You're no longer welcome here. You wanted to treat me like a guest, like a burden? Very well. Now it is you who will pack your things and leave. The silence that followed was crushing. Michael buried his face in his hands, torn between loyalty to his wife and the truth written in black and white. Cassandra's chair scraped against the floor as she stood, her voice breaking. You can't do this to me. I met her gaze, steady and unwavering. You did this to yourself. With that, she stormed from the kitchen, her footsteps pounding down the hall. I sank into a chair, exhaustion mixing with relief. For the first time in years, I felt the air in that house belonged to me again. Later, when Lydia came by, I told her everything. We sat together with cups of tea, laughing softly at the irony of it all. $150, she said, shaking her head. That's what set the storm in motion. I smiled faintly. It wasn't the money. It was the cruelty. Alistair always told me, dignity is worth more than gold. He was right. The fortune he left me may protect me, but it's my self-respect that truly saves me. That evening, as I walked through the house, I thought of Alistair. I could almost hear his steady voice. Never let anyone decide your worth, Nora. I thought of Lydia, who reminded me I wasn't alone. And I thought of myself, not the broken woman who once begged in her own kitchen, but the one who rose from that slap stronger than ever. To you listening to my story, I'll leave you with this. Greed and cruelty destroy the very people who practice them. Dignity and self-respect, once reclaimed, are priceless. If this story moved you, give it a like, share it with someone who might need the reminder, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales like this. And before you go, tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed karma come full circle? Did someone who mistreated you face the consequences in the end? Because sometimes, life doesn't just balance the scales. Sometimes, it tips them in ways no one could ever imagine.